and everything that's going on is that the NPCs that you see running around with goods and doing everything is part of the economic system. And so if you come across and take out a merchant with a bunch of like alloy on it or something, or another item that you can go and sell somewhere else, that was manufactured somewhere and paid for somewhere. It's in the system. So it's not like we're just generating printing money.
Which brings me to what I was curious about with pricing. Because if I run into you and you're carrying alloy, I can put you in a situation where if you don't drop half of it, your day's going to go real bad. If I run into an NPC, how am I going to be able to manage that same encounter? How am I going to be able to tell an NPC transport, I need half your cargo or your day's going to go really south? And how does that feed into the idea of, basically just feeding me loot?
Well,
I know you just said that everything's manufactured, but I guess to focus on something, how can I communicate about piracy with an NPC?
Well, yeah, well, you have the same option. If you come up to them, you start shooting them, and you're one of the communications options will be, give me your stuff.
So I'll have that option.
So kind
Right.
of like the Borg in Star Trek, you hit them up and you hail them and you say, hey, either you're coming with us or you're going down, and that's pretty much it. And like we could do a deal or you could get smoked.
Yeah, and the NPCs will, depending on like how what their faction is. There's a whole bunch of different ratings. They'll say, okay, here you are, don't kill me, or screw you, let's fight.
Perfect.
Can you join factions? Like, say, the Bandit. I want to be a trader with the Bandit. And they got.
You certainly can. You'll be able to. There's a bunch of sort of predefined factions like Merchants Guild, all that sort of stuff, and you'll do that. And then we're allowing people to create their own factions that all feed into that system. So that would be sort of the big guilds and stuff. And as I was saying, that all of them sort of track relationships between them. This faction like this faction, are they pissed off? Are they aligned? Are they in opposition to each other? And it kind of goes from there.
And that'll be kind of kept in like the ARC or like a news feed or something. Mm-hmm. So you could go to talk to an NPC and say, hey, what's going on in the universe in that sector? Oh, well, there's a war between these guys and these guys, and be careful because that stuff's hot over there.
It sounds a lot like a system that somebody who's played Freelancer would recognize.
Well, probably.
Yeah.
Someone that was designing it in the early days was working on. I mean, basically a lot of what I want to do in Star Citizen was originally with Freelancer. The tech was a lot more primitive then, but the idea was to do the single player game, which shipped, although it was a bit nerfed for what it was going to be. And then I was going to do it sort of basically a massively online game, and that was going to have a persistent universe that had dynamic economy. And I talked about it all in 1999 when I unveiled Freelancer for the first time. And Eve went and did that, and they did a really good job of it. But that was something that I wanted to do quite a ways before I even didn't have a chance to sort of finish up. So Star Citizen's it's basically me doing Wing Commander the way I would do Wing Commander today, and doing Freelancer the way I would do Freelancer today, in one holistic universe that can support both of them.
With way better graphics.
Yes, with way better graphics, way better fidelity, which means way better immersion.
With an Oculus Rift.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely very immersive.
This is a question that's kind of interesting. Redbeard was curious about how turrets work. If you can extrapolate on this, do you have any? So, do turrets work where you have to counter ship movements, or does it stay focused on a point as long as it's within the turret's range of motion? So, if you're pointing a turret at something and the ship turns, is it going to turn the turret as well, or is it going to stay focused on that point? Well, not necessarily auto aim, but kind of like bound, like.
Well, I guess it depends. It depends on what kind of turret you're talking about. I mean, if it's a manned turret and you're manning it, it's where you're pointing it. So if the ship starts going to the right, you better be turning your turret to keep your target and your thing. It's not going to auto for you. If if it's you can gangs like in some of the ships. Some of them are like unmanned turrets, which are kind of what the class 2 hard points are. Or even if, like in a constellation, it's just you can be able to sort of take over the turrets, which would then become unmanned. But then they'll all gang to where you're looking. So generally, in sort of articulated turrets, if I'm a pilot and I have a couple of those on my ship, it's where I'm looking. So like if you were flying, you had an Oculus Rift, so a really good example for this. But you could do it with a gamepad. One is your look, one is your.
So it's like the Apache thing where you like look.
Absolutely, yeah, 100%. That's exactly the design. That's what the Hornet's set for. So I actually think like there's some things that we're going to do that we haven't demoed, and the HUD and the dogfighting. I think it's going to be people were freaking out by like that EVA like little thing they did in Unity for 2 or 3 weeks,
I saw that.
just because you had this and you were doing the missile. So that's compared to what like the Star Citizen thing is going to be. It's going to be sort of a whole different level. But the immersion of that's going to be pretty awesome because like literally that's it's your your ability to sort of track and keep your targets as a pilot is really important. And so something like an Oculus Rift actually in a first person shooter like a Call of Duty is actually a bit weird because you're running around but you got a Rift and you're here with a gamepad. Whereas if you're got a joystick and you got a Rift on, I mean that's exactly the experience being in a pilot, being a fighter pilot. You're like literally sitting in a cockpit with a joystick. So it's probably going to be, I think, probably one of the most immersive experiences, which is why I think people really dug the EVA demo they did because it sort of feels very natural. Because then you're like, okay, there it is, and just click, target, so you can paint people and shoot, and it should be pretty cool.
Okay, so Chris, real quick, we are approaching the video hour,
Yep.
and so we want to do a quick giveaway before we go into the video.
Okay.
Is that cool? You want to come hit the green button?
I hit the green button. What happens on the green button?
That's what rolls the dice.
My house.
There's the dice.
Rolls the dice and picks who wins.
Okay. All right. Hang on a sec.
All right. After your
Plus
croissant.
one. Until. Yeah.
Because I know where the system that has a racetrack,
All right, here you go.
our people are going to be able to like.
Roll the dice.
Here
Here we go. Stress test.
Good guy.
It's not following.